close to noon over on the East Coast, or actually is noon. I'm pretty excited about today. We're going to be taking a little bit of a deeper dive into one of the coffees that truly has become a staff favorite. And this is our Colombia. Let me show you here. The Colombia Las Brisas. So this coffee, when we look at the label, anytime you look at a Batdorf label, you'll see that we have noted tasting notes, right? And so in this example, what we have on the label here, citrus, cocoa, and honey. So there's a few other items, or a few other notes that we would add to that, but we really like to use these terms because if you recall, if you've been watching these before, maybe, you've seen that we have a tasting wheel that we talk about. And when we look at that tasting wheel, it breaks down all of, there are 1,000 different, oh, thanks, Pamela. Yeah, I wanted it to be pretty. Yeah, Pamela says it's a pretty plate. It is a pretty plate, but it's a pretty wheel too. Look at that wheel. Look at all the color on there. We are really working hard in the coffee industry to help our customers understand all that we find in coffee, all the things that we think are so great in coffee. And so that's why we have the tasting wheel. And within that wheel, we have broad categories, nutty, sweet, floral, and then things, as you see, they move out from the center and they get more specific. And when we do the tastings that Bob and the coffee team does, both in Atlanta and in Olympia, they work together using their palates to find the sensations on the palate that really represent the coffee, what they think are the high notes of the coffee. So in this case, we talk about having a little citrus, in specifically orange citrus. We also talk about cacao, or cocoa in this case. I didn't have any cacao nibs, but we would talk about cacao nibs probably a little more specifically just because there's a bit of an acidity that's balanced in this coffee. There are floral notes in the coffee, and then also the sweetness is a sweetness like honey. So we often talk about coffee in this way because we know there are 1,000 different compounds located within the little coffee seed. Thousands of compounds that combine and recombine and that we transform through the roasting process to feature them and bring them up and make them apparent on the palate. You know, there's some coffees you might know, like our Harar, which have berry qualities. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that they were cooked with berries, does it? It means that there's an element inside of that coffee seed that when we nurture it correctly, brings up the quality of berry on the palate. So that is what we're talking about. There are these internal qualities of the coffee that we bring up to the roasting process. Now, of course, the process of roasting is really one of the final elements. We know that before we ever get into roasting, we have to start with, sourcing the coffee, of course. So what I want to share with you now is if you go to the web page and you go onto the page, you're going to see, as you move through it, a thing called the View Detailed Coffee Report. We really would like to get more folks interested in looking at this so that you can join us as our green bean buyer sources coffee. And that's really what these coffee reports do. The coffee reports are a way for folks to learn more about the coffee, not just the flavor notes, which we have on the bag, of course, not just those qualities of the coffee which we love so much and which we relate to our coffee wheel, but also everything else that comes along with that coffee. It's a series of relationships. So in the case of this Colombian coffee, this coffee is from Lima. So when you go to a coffee report, you'll see it on the screen here now. Over on the left-hand side, We list the first thing, probably the most important, is a producer. And in this case, it's Edward Geraldo. We then talk about the region of origin, in this case, Tolima, the variety of the coffee, and then we have the process. And we'll probably have a class about processing in the near horizon. And we'll bring in Bob, and maybe we can get some good photos from some of our trips to show you what processing really means. But at this point, we'll just suffice to say that processing refers to how we get that little seed that you know about, that green seed that we're going to roast, out of the fruit that it grows inside of. Now Bob will go on and will write the production notes, and he's pretty clear here when he talks about Colombian coffee. He has a love affair with Colombian coffee, and specifically something I didn't know until recently was that it actually really started in Tolima, right? So let's take a look at where Tolima is real quick. So when you look at our map, you can see our little heart up here where I'm located. And we travel all up there. It was my house, oops. We travel all the way down to Colombia. So Colombia, of course, just past Central America, where so much amazing coffee is grown. And when we zoom in, I have a little tag there, actually on the area, the literal town that's associated. But if you see this range of mountains that goes up. So this, this axis of coffee, when we think of Tolima, we really think of it as being in the southern end of that coffee growing range, right? And we'll get all the way down here. You can see that elevation there, so you can a little more clearly, right? Let's go. Let's see how far we can go down here into Planadas. There we are. Yep. So the coffee from Tolima, coming from the kind of the southern, what's associated as the southern region for coffee in Colombia, and really for Eduard Geraldo, a new farm. Now, if you take a look at the photo here, you'll see, if someone were to look at that picture of Las Brisas, they would say, "Oh yeah, well, clearly that's a new farm. Look at that. There's all those the bushes are very small. The coffee trees are very small." True, they are. But one thing we should know is that they're in a constant process in coffee farms, usually, especially some that are a little bit larger, of renewing their coffee. Right? They are in the process of. They have nurseries, and they are performing new cuttings, and they're preparing new plants to go into the ground. So it might be, when you look at any particular part of a larger coffee farm, that you would see new plants in the ground like this. However, this specific farm of Eduard's has only been producing for 7 years. So there's a lot of new growth here. And that's exciting, I think, for us, because obviously we love this coffee, but it also means that we're looking at a relationship which is new and growing, and that means that we're going to have the ability to have a relationship, hopefully for quite a while, with this particular producer. And as we build that relationship, that's at the heart of what we do in this company. Is we create relationships. We create relationships not just with all of you, but also with coffee producers. This is a point where I'm going to call out. I do hope that you join us tomorrow in this same space. We are going to have a coffee cupping again with Bob Bank, the green bean buyer for Backdoor from Bronson. And we're going to be cupping Guatemalan coffees, so just a little north of Colombia in Central America. And we're actually bringing in Pablo Gonzalez, the Gonzalez family of Finca El Valle. Finca El Valle, a coffee that we have been purchasing for, I believe, 20 years now. And so that's what I'm talking about when I talk about these relationships, is we're able to create relationships with farmers directly, where we visit them, we drink coffee with them on their farms, we look at the process that they're going through and the practices, And over time, we build a relationship of trust. And I'll let Bob and Pablo talk a little bit about that tomorrow, because Pablo is the second generation that we're working with out of El Valle. And so how great it is when we come to a new producer in an area that Bob loves, and that I think a lot of us in the staff have learned to love just because of the quality of this coffee. So let's brew the coffee really quick, shall we? So I want to use a method today that I think really is great for folks who are getting into brewing, maybe, or getting more deeply into the brewing, because it's kind of a kind of a transitional form of brewing. So what I'm doing today is we're going to be doing a clever dripper. So the clever dripper, I'll just kind of show you here. You can see it there, right? So the clever dripper looks just like a Melita, right? In a sense, the Melita, it uses a number 4 in this case, number 4 Melita filter, which I've pre-wet already. The difference with it, though, is that it's not using the water and gravity to pass through the grounds, but they're actually going to remain in suspension, much like a French press. So that's why I say it's kind of like a combination of the or a transition brewing method. It's like a French press, but it also uses the paper filtration. So excuse me there, wrong shot. So I'm going to go ahead and add my coffee. Now it's coarsely ground coffee because, again, it's going to be in full saturation. You'll see, I don't know if I can show this to you. You can see here the scale there. It should be 30 grams of coffee. Now, we talk a lot about weighing our coffee. And the reason we talk about weighing the coffee is because we are looking to create a very specific relationship between the amount of coffee and the amount of water. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and pour my water in now. Now, the relationship between the coffee and the water is going to be a 1:16 relationship. So for 1 gram of coffee, 16 grams of water. So I'll want to tare my scale, get it down to 0, and I want to add up to 480 grams. Now, like any time I do any form of brewing, Ben talked about it yesterday, the ability to control a bloom is really important. So I'm just going to add just enough water to start that bloom, and I'm going to start my timer as well. Okay. So the timer is started. As it's blooming into 30 seconds, we go ahead and add the rest of our water. You can see how that bubbles and it's expanded in size. You get to kind of try and really work with the saturation. Now, one of the nice aspects of this method, as we get close to 480, is that we're going to get to add something I love, which is agitation. There's a little bit of a joke there, how I love to be agitated. Oh, so close. There it is, 480. So one last step here as we prepare the coffee to simply sit in the water. As I am going to give it a very light stir. Right? And if you've been watching our tutorials, you know we talk a lot about evenness of extraction, right? So that's why we recommend getting a burr grinder, right? So that you can grind your coffee and get a really even grind size. Like really good burr grinders, ones we have, maybe one that you have already, allow us to crush the coffee and get a really even size of the grounds, right? And then when we add water, if we're doing pour-overs, the traditional pour-over method, you'll see that we are always, after we bloom the coffee, we talk about evenly distributing the water and trying to control that. Ben talked about that yesterday with the difference between just filling all the water up or controlling a slower amount of water going onto the grounds for a pour over with, in that case, a Melita style filter. And that again is about trying to really get the water and the saturation of the coffee even, right? So that we're not over extracting one part of coffee and under extracting another part of the coffee. So that's really important. In this situation, the reason we do the agitation is because since it's kind of just floating in the water, we could, in theory, have a lack of evenness in the extraction because some of the coffee will settle and no longer be in contact with water as other grounds. So that's why kind of a vigorous pour when we fill the water up, and then a little bit of that agitation at the end is good, right? Because it really allows us to get that coffee into a nice, strong solution with the water. So there's lots of the coffee grounds touching the water in all the places that matter. While we have a minute left here, I do want to head back over to our webpage here and remind everyone that, you know, when you order coffee today, if you were to go on to, for in this case, the Las Brisas, and add that to your cart, and then it's going to ask you, what size do you want? I want a 12-ounce bag. And if you don't have a grinder, you know what? You can actually choose the type of method you have at home here, and we'll grind it for you by all means. And then I'll harass you to buy a grinder later, as I do. If I add that to the cart, do I add that yet? No, not yet. Okay, now it's ready to go. I have the size. I want it to be whole bean. And if I go up to my cart here, when you go to the cart, I want you to remember that you can use the code today right down here. If you use the code watch and learn 10, you're going to get a discount. So we apply that coupon on there, and hopefully if it works, come on, there we are. There we have the discount was added on to that order. So I hope that folks are using these opportunities to capture some savings, because we love that you come here and you watch these with us. You know, it's been a great opportunity for those of us in outreach and sales to kind of find new ways to connect with our customers here. One of the other lovely things about the brewing method of the Clever is this fancy little pressure plate on the bottom, which you can demonstrate here. When you press it down on top of your container, it allows the coffee to go down through that paper filtration, right? And so again, when I talk about this type of brewing method, the Clever dripper being a transition, if someone's used to maybe a lot of French presses out there using that French press. Brendan did a great French press the other day, French press tutorial. French press is great, full saturation coffee brewing. The thing that this adds is paper filtration, and that's why I chose it for this Tolima that we're drinking today, so that I can pull out some of those citrus notes. I think that using a little bit of paper filtration helps kind of make the coffee a little clearer. And for a coffee like this, I definitely want to be able to taste everything that's in there. So here's my first cup of Colombia today. I'm pretty excited about it. There it is. Cool. And I think that Brendan, thank you for, and Ben, thank you for doing the production today. I want to take a look at the grounds here. So a little bit of that agitation too is what helped to settle the bed when it came time. Notice that there's not a lot of coffee clinging to the walls of the filter. That helps with that evenness as well when we're actually doing that last step of bringing the coffee down through the filter. I'm gonna put the I'm gonna put the coupon up here on the window right in front of my face. It's nice. There we are. Let's move it out of the way, shall we? There we go. There it is. Watch and Learn 10. Just want to encourage folks to use that. Now, when you use that code, it's not just for the coffee. Hopefully, you are going to try this Las Brisas today. It is also for anything that you might want to get online. So, my cup of Las Brisas. Yeah. For me, the thing that really pops out here are those cacao nibs. They come up right up to the top for me. Lovely cocoa flavor, and then the acidity. I put a lime on the plate, and my palate's not as trained as the folks in the coffee department, but they really, that's the type of, I think of it as a very soft acidity, and I get the orange for sure, but wow, it's such a lovely balanced acidity, and maybe it's because of that relationship to that cocoa flavor that I get from this. But what a great cup of coffee. Hey, thanks everyone for joining today. I really appreciate it. Thanks to Brendan and Ben for helping today with production. I appreciate that. And also, I want to remind everyone that tomorrow, I'm going to make an event for this, but tomorrow at the same time, we're going to do a Guatemalan coffee cupping. So a deeper dive into Guatemalan coffees. And Bob Bank is going to be there cupping from his home. I'll have matching coffees here to be doing the cupping follow along. And we're also going to have, again, Pablo Gonzalez, our friend from Guatemala, joining us. We did a test yesterday. It sounded great. So Bob will be doing translation. So no need to be fluent in Spanish, but if you are, it will help. And he's going to ask some questions about Pablo, but I also want you to be able to ask questions. So I'll be monitoring the board here. Bob's going to be doing a lot of the talking. So I'll be able to kind of look at your questions as they come in, much like Brendan and Ben do remotely when they help produce the show. And as you bring in questions, I'll make sure that Bob hears them, and then he can ask them directly to Pablo. So a great opportunity. Again, these are opportunities for us to expand the understanding of where these coffees come from and who our partners are. And in this case, we're dealing with a partner that we've been working with for 20 years. And it's great to have that relationship, because it allows us, we have a whole learning section we do called Seed the Cup. And that's really been a center of our mission tomorrow. A center of our mission in helping our customers understand where coffee comes from. Is it starts as a seed, and someone plants that seed. And so we want to make sure that you know who they are, that you get to meet them, and then we get to hear directly from them about how things are going in their particular origin. And then, of course, we can all come together and enjoy their coffee in spaces like this. So I want to remind everyone that tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, 1 p.m. Pacific Time, Brendan will be doing his show. So in the morning, 9 a.m., this space for Guatemalans, and then in the afternoon and early evening on the East Coast at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, 1 p.m. Pacific Time, Brendan will be doing the Kalita Wave brewing method. He'll be using Dancing Goats, a blend. So we've looked at a single origin, a deeper dive into that today. We'll be doing a blend. We'll be doing Guatemalans tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern, and then at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m., Brendan will be back here doing another demonstration of a filter method, the Kalita Wave. So I look forward to you joining us. Thank you so much. We appreciate the fact that we get to be with you in this space, to share coffee with you still, and we love helping you as you work to turn your homes into cafes. So take care, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow morning.